Welcome to the Book Review Podcast. Today, we're taking a shortcut to being well-informed on a concept that can, profoundly transform how we understand leadership, innovation, and even our own daily choices. We've got a truly illuminating stack of sources, all centered around Simon Sinek's groundbreaking book, Start With Why: How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action.
This deep dive is all about extracting the most powerful nuggets of knowledge from this material.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that Sinek posits there's this naturally occurring pattern, almost like a biological imperative. It explains why some leaders and organizations really inspire profound loyalty and action, while others merely resort to these short-term manipulations. Our mission today is to unpack this pattern and really see how it applies to your world. So what does this all mean for you, our curious listener? As you navigate your own career, maybe lead teams, or even just think about your personal brand, get ready for some serious aha moments, because we're about to explore the core idea that truly inspiring success isn't primarily about what you do or even how you do it, but fundamentally why you do it. Okay, so let's unpack this core idea Sinek introduces, the golden circle. It's surprisingly simple, but really powerful as a visual framework. It's got these three concentric circles: what, how, chav, and WHY. It's basically illustrating different levels of understanding and communication.
That's right. So at the outermost circle, you've got what. Every company, every single person knows what they do. Their products, their services, job functions, specific tasks. It's the easiest thing to identify and talk about. Sinek points out, whether you're a giant corporation or just an individual, describing your what is pretty straightforward.
Then there's the next circle in, how, W. Some companies and some individuals, they can articulate how they do what they do. This often includes things like their differentiating value proposition, or maybe their proprietary process, their unique selling points. A lot of people think this is what truly sets them apart or motivates customers. It's about how they execute differently, maybe more efficiently.
But this leads to the big question, right? What about that innermost circle, the WHY? Very, very few people or organizations can clearly articulate their WHY. And Sinek is super clear here. This isn't about making money. Money's always a result, he says, never the cause. The WHY is about your fundamental purpose, your deeply held cause, your core belief. Why does your company exist beyond profit? Why do you personally get out of bed every morning? And then maybe most importantly, why should anyone else care enough to, join you or buy from you?
And that's fascinating, isn't it? Because intuitively, we're sort of taught to lead with our product. Here's what I sell. Here's how it's better. But Sinek's crucial insight is that most organizations communicate from the outside in. They lead with what? Then maybe how, W. Think about almost every ad you see. But the truly inspiring leaders and organizations, the ones who build actual movements, they communicate from the inside out. They start with WHY. Apple is like the classic example he uses. They don't just sell computers. They start by talking about their belief in challenging the status quo, empowering individuals, and then they tell you they make great computers to do that.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Sinek basically identifies two main ways to influence human behavior: manipulation or inspiration. Now, manipulations are incredibly common, and they often work in the short term, but they come at this kind of hidden cost. They just don't build loyalty. They might get you a transaction, sure, but they don't foster that lasting connection.
And it's interesting because a lot of these so-called manipulations, they sound like pretty standard business practice, don't they? Like sales or promotions. But Sinek argues they come at a profound cost. Take price drops, for example. Great for a quick sale, maybe, but they erode profit margins, and they train customers to just wait for the next discount. Like General Motors cashback incentives that created cashback junkies. Fear is another big one. Think about that old saying, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM.
Oh, yeah.
It often led to safe choices, maybe not the best choices, or those this is your brain on drugs ads. They work, sure, but they don't inspire.
Aspirations, too, can be a form of manipulation. We see this every single January, right? Gym memberships spike, only to have people quickly drop off. That desire to achieve a dream, it isn't enough to sustain the behavior without some deeper underlying motivation, that WHY. Peer pressure is another one. Celebrity endorsements, or claims like 70% of your competitors use the solution. It works because we're afraid of being wrong or getting left behind, not because we're genuinely sold on the product's intrinsic value.
And then there's novelty, which is often, disguised as innovation. Remember the Motorola RAZR?
Oh, absolutely.
Huge. It was new, exciting, drove massive initial sales. but its impact faded pretty quickly. Sinek makes this important distinction, adding a camera to a phone. That's a feature.
Right.
It's not a true innovation that fundamentally changes an industry.
Yeah.
Real innovation, he argues, is something like iTunes reshaping the entire music industry. That's driven by a deeper WHY, not just a new what.
So, okay, if these manipulations undeniably work, at least in the short term, why are they actually problematic for long-term success? Well, they create this constant treadmill of stress, really, for both the buyer and the seller. They cost more over time because you always need new incentives. And crucially, they do not foster loyalty. Sinek has this powerful definition of loyalty. It's when people are willing to turn down a maybe demonstrably better product or price just to continue doing business with you. He points to how people literally sent checks to Southwest Airlines after 9/11.
Wow.
Not because they had to, but out of genuine appreciation and belief in the airline, that level of connection. Manipulations just can't create that. Manipulations lead to fleeting transactions. Inspiration builds enduring loyalty.
That is such a critical distinction. So, okay, if manipulations only create transaction, how do you actually inspire that true loyalty, that belief? Sinek argues it's not just some clever marketing strategy. It's actually rooted in our very biology. And this is where it really starts to click, I think.
Exactly. He reveals that the golden circle maps directly onto the structure of the human brain. It's fascinating. Our newest brain region, the neocortex, that corresponds to the what level. This is the rational, analytical part of our brain. It's responsible for processing facts, figures, language. It's the part that understands, this phone has a 12-megapixel camera.
Okay. And then we have the middle two sections, right? The limbic brain. This is older, more
primitive part of the brain.
Yeah.
And it corresponds to how W and, crucially, WHY. It's responsible for all our feelings, like trust and loyalty. And it's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making. But here's the kicker. The limbic brain has no capacity for language.
Whoa. Okay, so that explains those gut decisions we make, doesn't it?
Perfectly.
When a decision just feels right, but we have trouble explaining exactly why.
Mm-hmm.
We might try to rationalize it later with facts and figures pulling from our neocortex, that language part.
Right.
But the core motivation came from that deeper feeling-oriented limbic brain.
Exactly. And this is why traditional polling and market research, which often ask us to explain our choices, they frequently capture our rationalizations, not our true limbic-driven motivations.
It's almost like Sinek is giving us a scientific basis for intuition. That gut feeling we sometimes dismiss as irrational, it's actually our limbic brain doing its job, making a decision based on trust and connection that it just can't articulate in words.
Precisely.
And so if companies only communicate what they do, they're forcing us to make decisions using only that rational, language-driven neocortex, which leads to uncertainty, maybe less impactful choices.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Winning hearts, engaging that limbic brain before minds, appealing to the neocortex, that's the key to building true inspiration and loyalty. When we trust our gut, it's because our limbic brain is actually incredibly smart. It often knows the right thing to do, even if we can't quite articulate why. Sinek calls this art before science, emphasizing the power of that intangible feeling over just raw data in driving our behavior.
Okay, so it's one thing to understand the golden circle and the biology behind it, but how do you actually, live your WHY? How do you put it into practice? Sinek emphasizes three crucial components for this to really work. Clarity of WHY, discipline of H, how W, and consistency of what?
First up, clarity. You absolutely, positively must know why you do what you do. Crystal clear. If you don't have that clear sense of your purpose, your cause, your belief, nobody else ever will. And what's interesting is Sinek notes that discovering your WHY isn't about inventing something new or aspirational. It's often about looking backward, examining your origins, your core experiences, your deepest beliefs to find that sort of intrinsic purpose that's always been there.
Okay, clarity first. Then comes discipline. And Sinek says, for many, this is the hardest part.
It really is.
It's that unwavering commitment to never veer from your core cause and to hold yourself accountable to how you do things. It means living by your values, your guiding principles, even when there are short-term costs or maybe easier paths available. Like the founders of Southwest Airlines prioritizing making flying accessible and fun, even when it went against all the traditional airline norms back then.
Mm-hmm.
That required immense discipline, right? To stick to their unique mission despite all that industry pressure.
Absolutely. And finally, number 3 is consistency. Everything you say and everything you do has to consistently prove what you believe. Your what's, Your products, your services, your marketing campaigns, your PR, your company culture, even who you hire. All of these are the tangible results. They're the authentic expressions of your WHY. Authenticity doesn't just sort of happen, it's demonstrated consistently at the wet level. Think about Dell's failed attempts at making MP3 players and PDAs. Or Volkswagen trying to sell that super luxury Phaeton car.
Right, that felt weird.
Yeah. They're classic examples of inconsistency. They veered from what people knew them for, what they stood for. It confused customers and diluted their WHY.
And this is where Sinek's celery test comes in, which I love because it's such a simple, actionable filter. It helps you maintain that consistency.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah, he uses this analogy to explain that if an opportunity, maybe a new product, or even a partnership, if it doesn't fit your core WHY, it's not for you. Doesn't matter how lucrative or appealing it seems on the surface. If your WHY is, say, healthy living, you only buy celery and rice milk at the store, not Oreos, right?
Right. Filters out the junk.
Exactly. It helps filter out distractions. We saw this with Christina Harbridge's collections firm, Bridgeport Financial. They actually measured why, how agents treated people with respect, not just how much money they collected. The result, 300% more success.
Wow.
Or Dwayne Honor's construction company, which reinforces its WHY of valuing family time by literally finding employees who stay too late at the office.
That's commitment.
They're measuring and enforcing their WHY.
Yeah. Okay, so this raises an important question. How do these movements actually start and grow? How do you get beyond just a handful of early believers? Sinek connects this concept to Everett Rogers' law of diffusion of innovations, which is basically a model explaining how new ideas, new technologies, or products spread through a social system, through society. It segments populations into these distinct groups. You've got innovators, about 2.5%, then early adopters, 13.5%, then the early majority and late majority, both 34%, and finally the laggards at 16%.
Right.
That bell curve. Sinek explains that mass market success, what's often called the tipping point, that happens when you penetrate roughly 15 to 18% of the market. And this critical group, it primarily consists of those innovators and the early adopters, the folks on the far left of the curve. And they are drawn not just by rational benefits, but by a clear, compelling WHY. They trust their gut. They're often willing to pay a premium or maybe suffer some initial inconvenience for a new product, and they're less swayed by just simple facts or figures.
They're the ones who'll buy that unproven tech because they believe in the underlying idea, the cause.
These are the true believers. They don't need heavy marketing or incentives to spread your message. They do it intrinsically. They do it because your WHY aligns with their own WHY. Sinek points to TiVo's initial failure as a really prime example. Despite having a superior product, pausing and rewinding live TV, which was revolutionary then, they tried to sell what it did.
Yeah, the features.
Exactly, not why you needed it, which was fundamentally about gaining control over your life and your media consumption. Apple, in stark contrast, consistently starts with WHY, and their early adopters became these incredibly powerful ambassadors. Why? Because they believed in Apple's cause, that cause of challenging the status quo, empowering individuals.
So that means the goal isn't necessarily to sell to everyone right out of the gate. That's kind of counterintuitive.
It is.
It's really about finding the people who believe what you believe. Get enough people on that left side of the curve, those innovators and early adopters, get them on your side. And they will passionately encourage the rest to follow. They become your most effective ambassadors, building that movement from the inside out.
And this extends beyond just customers, too. Great organizations become great because the people inside the employees feel protected, feel valued. They feel like they genuinely belong to a culture that's built around a common WHY. This fosters profound trust. And that trust, in turn, allows individuals to take risks, to share ideas, to innovate. This is exactly what Herb Kelleher famously did at Southwest Airlines. He actually stated, employees come first, then customers, then shareholders.
Wow, that's bold.
It was, and it created this incredible culture of trust and loyalty that translated directly into exceptional customer service and, yes, profitability.
The comparison Sinek makes between the Wright brothers and Samuel Pierpont Langley illustrates this so beautifully. It's one of my favorite anecdotes from the book.
It's a great story.
Langley had immense resources, right? Backed by a huge $50,000 grant from the War Department, access to top scientific talent.
Everything going for him, on paper?
Exactly. But his motivation, it was fame, a desire to be the first to fly. He was driven purely by the what and the outcome. The Wright brothers, meanwhile, had far fewer resources. They funded their dream from a humble bicycle shop, No government grants, no college degrees on the team.
Just passion.
But they were driven by this passionate belief in flight itself. They inspired a dedicated team because they started with WHY. And when the Wrights finally succeeded, Langley just quit. Despite having way more resources still at his disposal, his WHY wasn't strong enough to keep him going.
That's it, exactly. The true role of a leader, Sinek argues, isn't necessarily to come up with all the great ideas yourself. It's to create an environment where great ideas can happen, giving people something profound to work toward that clear WHY and not just something to work on. This collective sense of purpose, it's absolutely critical for sustained innovation and for weathering tough times when the market shifts or the economy gets rocky. It really transforms a job into more of a mission.
And what's really interesting, maybe a bit sobering, is that the biggest challenge to maintaining that clear WHY often comes with success itself.
Yeah, the paradox of success.
Right. As organizations grow, that founder's initial passionate WHY can get diluted, maybe go fuzzy. And that leads to a gradual reliance back on those short-term manipulations we talked about earlier. This split, as Sinek calls it, it's evident in companies like Walmart after Sam Walton died, or even Apple during the struggles when Steve Jobs initially left. That initial passion, that clear WHY, it gets lost somehow as the company scales and focuses more on the what and how W.
Indeed. Sinek stresses that the leader, ideally a WHY-type person, a visionary, acts as the megaphone for the organization's purpose. But for the company to maintain its authenticity and its inspiring power over time, the successors, whether they are HOW types or other WHY types, they must profoundly embody and perpetuate that original cause. It's about continuity of vision, not just, replacing a CEO. Think of Howard Putnam, Herb Kelleher's successor at Southwest. He was known as a Dunkin' Donuts guy, which perfectly embodied Southwest's sort of everyman WHY and ensured that unique culture stayed intact.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's our final takeaway from this deep dive into start with why?
Yeah.
It feels like it's not just about intellectually knowing your WHY, but really rigorously, consistently living it. Every decision you make, every product you launch, every interaction, every communication you put out there, it should all echo that core belief.
Absolutely.
The value you provide, the loyalty you earn, the inspiration you generate, it all seems to stem fundamentally from that clarity of WHY.
Yeah, exactly. If you align your actions with your purpose, you won't need to spend all your energy trying to convince people. Instead, you'll naturally attract those who already believe what you believe. It becomes less about selling and more about finding alignment. It's about finding your loyal customers, your most dedicated employees, your truest partners. Not just chasing any transaction. You're not just building a business, Sinek would argue. You're actually baiting a movement.
Which leaves us with a really important question for you, our listener. What is your WHY? And maybe just as important, how can you ensure everything you say and do, both professionally and personally, is truly consistent with it? How can you move from just motivating people to truly inspiring them?
Yeah.
Definitely something to keep thinking about. Thanks for listening to the Book Review Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment. See you next time.